Listen up, because what I'm about to tell you is going to shock you to your core. At 7 a.m. this morning, Donald Trump launched an all-out assault on Canada, and I'm not talking about some diplomatic slap on the wrist. I'm talking about a nuclear economic attack that could have crippled our entire economy. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Mark Carney, the man who everyone said was just a boring banker, had a response locked and loaded 4 hours later that didn't just defend Canada, it obliterated Trump's position and made him look like an amateur. Now, I've been in the Shark Tank for decades. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals. I've seen seasoned CEOs crumble under pressure. But what I witnessed today, this was masterclass level strategy that proves one thing: preparation beats improvisation every single time. You think you understand politics. You think you know what leadership looks like. Forget everything you thought you knew, because I'm about to break down exactly how Mark Carney just executed the most brilliant counterstrike in Canadian political history, and why every entrepreneur needs to learn from this playbook right now. Breaking: Trump attacks Canada. At 7 a.m., Carney's pre-built response lands 4 hours later and wins. Kevin, the hook, 200 words. Listen up, because what I'm about to tell you is going to shock you to your core. At 7 a.m. this morning, Donald Trump launched an all-out assault on Canada, and I'm not talking about some diplomatic slap on the wrist. I'm talking about a nuclear economic attack that could have crippled our entire economy. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Mark Carney, the man who everyone said was just a boring banker, had a response locked and loaded 4 hours later that didn't just defend Canada, it obliterated Trump's position and made him look like an amateur. Now, I've been in the Shark Tank for decades. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals. I've seen seasoned CEOs crumble under pressure. But what I witnessed today, this was masterclass level strategy that proves one thing: preparation beats improvisation every single time. You think you understand politics? You think you know what leadership looks like? Forget everything you thought you knew, because I'm about to break down exactly how Mark Carney just executed the most brilliant counterstrike in Canadian political history, and why every entrepreneur needs to learn from this playbook right now. Part 1. The ambush nobody saw coming. 1,000 words. Let me paint you a picture of what happened at exactly 7:03 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm sitting in my office in Boston, coffee in hand, watching the markets open, when my phone explodes. And I mean explodes. 15 notifications in 30 seconds. Every single one of them screaming the same thing: Trump declares economic war on Canada. Now, I've dealt with Trump before. I know his playbook. The man doesn't do anything without calculated chaos. But this was different. This wasn't a tweet. This wasn't a press conference soundbite. This was a full-scale, coordinated assault designed to catch Canada with its pants down. Trump announced live on Fox and Friends, because of course he did that. He was implementing immediate tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, lumber, and dairy. We're talking about 35% across the board. 35%. Do you understand what that means? That's not a negotiation tactic. That's an economic execution. But wait, it gets worse. He also announced that any Canadian company doing business with American firms would face enhanced scrutiny from the IRS and the Department of Commerce. Translation: he was weaponizing the American bureaucracy to strangle Canadian businesses. And just to twist the knife a little deeper, he threatened to pull out of USMCA entirely if Canada didn't get in line within 48 hours. 48 hours. The markets went into freefall. The Canadian dollar dropped 3.2% in 12 minutes. Canadian stocks in the resource sector down 7%. Manufacturers, panic mode. The Toronto Stock Exchange looked like the Titanic hitting the iceberg. And here's what nobody is talking about. Trump timed this perfectly. He knew that most Canadian politicians were either still asleep or just getting into their offices. He knew that Prime Minister's office wouldn't have had time to coordinate a response. He was banking on Canada doing what it always does: scrambling, looking weak, issuing some vanilla statement about working with our American partners while getting absolutely demolished in the court of public opinion. This was supposed to be Canada's worst nightmare. A sucker punch delivered with such precision that we'd be knocked out before we even knew we were in a fight. But Trump made one fatal mistake. He forgot about Mark Carney. Now, let me tell you something about Mark Carney that most people don't understand. This man ran the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis, and we came out stronger than almost any other nation. Then he went to England and ran the Bank of England through Brexit, arguably the most chaotic economic period in British history. This is not some politician who learned economics from a textbook. This is a guy who has lived in the war room, making billion-dollar decisions while the world burns around him. And here's the thing about guys like Carney. They don't react. They prepare. While everyone else in Ottawa was running around like chickens with their heads cut off, while the media was writing headlines about Canada's economic Pearl Harbor, Mark Carney was sitting in a bunker somewhere with a response that had been built, war-gamed, and ready to deploy for exactly this scenario. 4 hours after Trump's attack, 11:17 a.m. to be precise, Carney stepped up to a podium in Ottawa with the most devastating counterstrike I've ever seen in politics. No stammering, no defensive posturing, no, we're reviewing our options, corporate speak. He came out swinging like a heavyweight champion. First move? He announced that Canada was immediately activating retaliatory tariffs on $72 billion worth of American goods, specifically targeting products made in swing states. Wisconsin dairy, done. Michigan automotive parts, taxed. Florida orange juice, goodbye. He wasn't just playing defense. He was going straight for Trump's political jugular. But that was just the appetizer. Second move, and this is where it gets brilliant. Carney announced that Canada was fast-tracking trade agreements with the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and the UK to bypass American markets entirely. He had actual numbers, projected timelines, implementation strategies. This wasn't a bluff. This was a fully operational plan that had clearly been in the works for months. Third move, this is my favorite part. Carney looked directly into the camera and said, and I'm quoting here, "President Trump seems to have forgotten that 38 states depend on Canadian energy exports. If he wants to play economic chicken, we're happy to remind Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania what happens when the lights go out in January." Boom. He just threatened to cut off energy exports to the American Midwest in the middle of winter. And he did it with the calm, measured tone of a man reading a quarterly earnings report. The markets reversed in real time. Canadian dollar recovered 80% of its losses within an hour. American stocks in affected sectors, they started tanking because investors realized Trump had just walked into a trap. But here's what really happened that nobody's talking about. This wasn't luck. This wasn't improvisation. This was preparation meeting opportunity. Carney had clearly built this response weeks, maybe months in advance. He knew Trump's patterns. He knew the leverage points. He knew exactly which economic buttons to push to make this counterstrike not just effective, but devastating. And that's the lesson every single entrepreneur needs to burn into their brain right now. In business, in politics, in life, the person who prepares for the worst-case scenario is the person who wins when chaos hits. Trump thought he was ambushing Canada. Instead, he walked face first into a buzzsaw that had been waiting for him all along. And we're just getting started. Now, here's where most people get this completely wrong. They think this is about tariffs. They think this is about trade. They think this is some kind of economic pissing contest between two countries. W-R-O-N-G. 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 This is about leverage. This is about positioning. This is about understanding that in any negotiation, whether you're closing a deal in the Shark Tank or playing geopolitical chess with the most powerful country on earth, the person who controls the narrative controls the outcome. And Mark Carney just seized control of the narrative so fast that Trump is still trying to figure out what hit him. Let me break down exactly what happened in those 4 hours between Trump's attack and Carney's response, because this is where the real genius lives. Most people think Carney was scrambling, building a response, calling meetings, getting approvals. Nonsense. That's what amateurs do. That's what weak leaders do when they're caught off guard. Carney was doing something infinitely more powerful. He was waiting. You heard me right. He was waiting for Trump to fully commit to his position, waiting for the American president to paint himself into a corner, waiting for the media cycle to spread the story, waiting for American businesses to start making phone calls to the White House asking, "What the hell are you doing?" Because here's what Trump didn't anticipate. The second he announced those tariffs, American CEOs started doing the math, and the math was ugly. General Motors, they import 62% of their parts from Canada. Those tariffs just added $2,000, $800 to the cost of every vehicle. Ford, same story. Wisconsin dairy farmers who export to Canada, they just lost their second biggest market overnight. Michigan manufacturers, they were already calling their congressman before Trump finished his Fox and Friends interview. Carney K knew this was going to happen. He knew that Trump's announcement would trigger immediate panic in the American business community. So what did he do? He let Trump's own weapon backfire before he even responded. That 4-hour delay wasn't incompetence, it was strategy. By the time Carney stepped up to that podium, there were already 3 U.S. senators publicly questioning Trump's decision. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce had released a statement calling it economically reckless. Stock futures were tanking in American manufacturing sectors. Trump had already lost the business community before Carney said a single word. But Carney didn't stop there. Oh no. Because step 1 was letting Trump hurt himself. Step 2 was finishing the job. When Carney announced those retaliatory tariffs, he didn't just pick random products. He picked products with surgical precision designed to maximize political pain for Trump. Wisconsin dairy, Paul Ryan's home state, a swing state. Trump won by less than 1%. Michigan automotive, another swing state. Florida citrus, critical for Trump's electoral math. Kentucky bourbon, Mitch McConnell's backyard. Every single product on that retaliation list was deliberately chosen to turn Trump's own political allies against him. This wasn't about economics. This was about making it politically impossible for Trump to sustain his position. And it worked. Within 6 hours of Carney's response, Republican senators were lining up to distance themselves from Trump's tariffs. Within 12 hours, Fox Business was running segments titled, "Did Trump Just Hand Canada a Victory?" Within 24 hours, Trump's own economic advisors were reportedly in emergency meetings trying to find an off-ramp. Now, let me tell you why this matters for every entrepreneur watching this. In business, timing is everything, but most people misunderstand what timing means. They think it means being fast, moving quick, responding immediately. Wrong. Real timing is about knowing when to wait and when to strike. It's about letting your opponent commit to a bad position before you reveal your hand. It's about patience combined with preparation. I've seen this play out 1,000 times in the Shark Tank. Entrepreneur comes in, makes a proposal, other sharks jump in with offers, and the smart entrepreneur, they wait. They let the offers stack up. They let the sharks compete against each other. They let the tension build until they have maximum leverage. That's exactly what Carney did. But here's the part that's going to blow your mind. Carney's response wasn't just about defense. It wasn't just about matching Trump's aggression. It was about repositioning Canada on the global stage in a way that makes us stronger regardless of what Trump does next. Those trade agreements he announced with the EU, Japan, and South Korea, those aren't just backup plans. Those are strategic pivots that have been in the works since Trump first got elected. Carney just used Trump's attack as the excuse to fast-track them and make Canada less dependent on American markets. That's 4D chess, people. Trump attacks thinking he's going to force Canada into submission. Instead, Carney uses the attack as justification to diversify Canada's trade relationships, strengthen ties with other major economies, and reduce our vulnerability to American economic blackmail in the future. Trump didn't weaken Canada. He gave Carney the perfect excuse to make Canada economically stronger. And here's the kicker. Carney delivered this entire counterstrike with the emotional temperature of a glacier. No anger, no defensive whining, no how dare you political theater. Just cold, calculated, devastating strategic execution. He smiled. He presented facts. He laid out consequences. And then he walked off the podium while American markets went into panic mode. That's power. That's leadership. That's what it looks like when someone who actually knows what they're doing goes up against someone who's all bluster and no substance. Now, Trump has exactly 3 options, and they're all bad. Option 1, back down. Admit he made a mistake, reverse the tariffs. Political suicide. Option 2, double down, escalate further. Start an all-out trade war that devastates American businesses and guarantees he loses the next election. Option 3, try to negotiate his way out, which means admitting that Carney outmaneuvered him and giving Canada concessions just to save face. Every single path forward makes Trump look weak. And that's because Carney built a response that was designed not just to counter Trump's attack, but to create a situation where Trump can't win no matter what he does next. That is what elite level strategy looks like. And if you're in business, if you're building a company, negotiating deals, competing in ANY arena, you need to understand this playbook because it's the same playbook that separates winners from losers in every competitive environment. All right, now we get to the meat of this whole thing. Because what happened between Trump and Carney isn't just some political drama you read about and forget. This is a masterclass in strategic thinking that every single entrepreneur needs to download into their brain right now. I've spent 40 years building businesses, investing millions, and watching people either win or get destroyed in high-stakes negotiations. And what Carney just pulled off contains 5 lessons that are worth more than any MBA you'll ever pay for. So pay attention, because I'm about to hand you the blueprint that separates the amateurs from the champions. Lesson 1. Preparation beats talent every single time. Trump is a showman. He's a branding genius. He knows how to control media cycles and dominate headlines. Those are real skills. But you know what beats natural talent? Preparation. Carney didn't wing that response. He didn't walk into a room at 5 a.m. and say, "Okay, team, what do we do?" That response was built. It was war game. It was stress tested. It was sitting in a vault waiting for exactly this scenario. And here's what most entrepreneurs get wrong. They think preparation means having a business plan. Wrong. Real preparation means having a response ready for your worst case scenario. When I invest in a company, you know the first question I ask? What happens if your biggest customer drops you tomorrow? If they don't have an answer, if they haven't prepared for that nightmare, I'm out. Carney had clearly asked himself, what happens if Trump goes nuclear on trade? And he didn't just think about it. He built the counter response. He identified the leverage points. He mapped out the retaliation targets. He had the numbers ready. When chaos hit, he didn't panic. He just executed. That's how you win in business. That's how you win in life. Lesson 2. Know your opponent's weaknesses better than they do. Trump's biggest weakness isn't his ego. It isn't his impulsiveness. It's that he fundamentally doesn't understand complex systems. He sees trade as a zero-sum game where the loudest voice wins. Carney knew this, and he used it against him. Trump thought he was wielding a sledgehammer. What he actually did was hand Carney a loaded gun and point it at his own foot. In business, I see this all the time. Entrepreneurs walk into the Shark Tank thinking they know their competition. They don't. They know the surface. They know the marketing. They know the press releases. The winners, they know their competitors' supply chain vulnerabilities. They know which clients are unhappy. They know which executives are about to jump ship. They know where the real weaknesses are. Carney knew that Trump's tariffs would hurt American businesses more than Canadian ones. He knew which states were vulnerable. He knew which politicians would revolt. He knew exactly where to apply pressure to make Trump's position collapse. You want to win? Stop studying your competitors' strengths. Study their weaknesses. Then build your strategy around exploiting them mercilessly. Lesson 3. Control the narrative, or the narrative controls you. Here's what Trump thought would happen. He'd announce tariffs. Canada would scramble. The media would write stories about weak Canada getting pushed around, and he'd look like a strong leader. Here's what actually happened. Carney flipped the narrative completely. Within hours, the story wasn't Trump's strong arms Canada. The story was Trump's reckless tariffs backfire spectacularly. By the end of the day, business networks were running segments on how Canada outsmarted Trump. That is narrative control. In business, the entrepreneur who controls the story wins. I don't care if you have the better product. I don't care if you have the better team. If your competitor controls the narrative, if they're the ones framing how customers think about the market, you're finished. Carney didn't just respond to Trump's attack. He reframed the entire situation. He turned Trump from the aggressor into the victim of his own stupidity. And once that narrative took hold, Trump couldn't recover. When you're in a competitive situation, whether it's a pitch meeting, a negotiation, or a market battle, ask yourself, who's controlling the story? If it's not you, you're already losing. Lesson 4. Never show emotion when you have the winning hand. You know what I loved about Carney's response? Zero emotion. No anger, no outrage, no theatrical how dare you. Nonsense. Just cold, calculated, devastating facts. Meanwhile, Trump was on Twitter having a meltdown, calling Carney names, making threats, looking desperate. And that's how you know who's winning. The person who stays calm while their opponent loses their mind, that's the person with the power. I've closed billion-dollar deals. And I can tell you right now, The second you show emotion in a negotiation, you've lost. Because emotion tells your opponent that they've gotten to you. It tells them you're reacting instead of executing. Carney's calm demeanor wasn't just good optics. It was peace psychological warfare. It communicated, I expected this, I'm prepared for this, you have no power over me. In business, when someone attacks you, when a competitor launches a smear campaign, when a client threatens to walk, when an investor tries to lowball you, your response should be ice-cold precision. No drama, no panic, just calculated, strategic execution. Lesson 5. The best defense is a counterattack that makes your opponent's position impossible. Most people think defense means blocking, protecting, minimizing damage. Wrong. Elite-level defense means launching a counterattack so devastating that your opponent's original move becomes a liability. Trump attacked with tariffs. Carney didn't just block those tariffs, he launched retaliatory measures that made Trump's entire position politically and economically UN sustainable. That's how you play defense in business. Someone undercuts your price, you don't just match it. You launch a new product that makes their product obsolete. Someone poaches your talent, you don't just offer more money. You create a culture so strong that their company becomes known as the place where careers go to DIE. You turn their attack into their problem. Carney didn't just survive Trump's ambush, he turned it into an opportunity to strengthen Canada's position globally. That's not defense, that's dominance. Here's what this all comes down to. Mark Carney just taught every entrepreneur on the planet the most valuable lesson in competitive strategy. It's not about being the loudest. It's not about being the most aggressive. It's not about making threats. It's about preparation. It's about knowing your opponent. It's about controlling the narrative. It's about staying calm under pressure. And it's about launching counterattacks that don't just defend, they destroy your opponent's ability to fight back. Trump thought he was starting a war. Carney showed him he brought a knife to a gunfight. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you win. Now go out there and build something that your competition can't touch.